I also saw Radhika's poll on Instagram. What are the odds that the baby will seek attention 100% or 500%? So my vote was 500.
1000%. If I put the video off, my baby has called me.
Right. Well, perhaps we can get their views on the topic as well. Well, we are live and we have audiences trickling in. So we will start. Hello and welcome to a special edition of our webinar series, where we host discussions on contemporary issues with leaders of communications. My name is Hemant Kole and I'm a part of the School of Communications and Reputation. And as a part of the Global Alliance's Ethics Month, this edition is being hosted by SCORE as one of the several initiatives geared to bring greater global attention to ethics. And while many of the Global Alliance member associations are engaged in ethics-related activities at different points throughout the year, February 2021 unifies Global Alliance members' activities, and it aims to multiply our collective efforts to educate and inform the world about ethics. And we are thankful to you for taking time out for this initiative as well. The hashtag for this event is hashtag EthicsMatters. So if you find anything insightful, please tweet about it with this hashtag. And I would also encourage you to look for this hashtag to find some incredible work that our fellow members have been doing. I'll also drop a link towards the end of the discussion that you can check out. We are bringing this event to you thanks to PR Consultants Association of India, PRCAI, Reputation Today, and OneSource. Thank you, Sandeep, once again for helping us reach out to many members of the fraternity. If you're watching this on Zoom, and if you have any questions, feel free to put them in this Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And this is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. Now, allow me to introduce our panel for today. We are very grateful to be joined by leaders of communications firms. We have Aman Abbas from Commwiser. Hi, Aman.
Hi.
We have Lovina Gujral from Candour Communications.
Hello.
We have Neha Bajaj from Scroll Mantra.
Hi.
And we have Pranav Kumar from Allison+Partners.
Hello, very happy to be here this evening.
And we have Radhika Nihalani of Think Inc. Communications. Welcome to all the panelists.
Hi, everyone.
So thanks for joining us. Let's jump right into it. I want to start by saying that ethics and really all this term encompasses. These are the primary purview of public relations professionals and the work that we do. So at the outset, I want to invite each panelist to talk about why they think ethics are important in PR generally, and to you as a PR leader specifically. So can we start with Aman?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hemant. In fact, ethics basically in general means doing what is right, but in particular, in the context of public relations, since public relations is associated with influencing public's opinion, then it becomes all the more important. So I think, it is the responsibility and the duty of PR professionals to ensure that if an opinion is being built, it is built on ethical grounds, legally correct and moral grounds. And at the same time, one has to actually see towards which side the influence is actually, being made. What public is made to think or made to like a particular idea or a product, whether that idea itself is good or not. So I think very briefly I would say that and the concept of public relations, which is influencing opinion, is actually being questioned at times for being ethical or non-ethical. It is absolutely ethical as long as you're taking it in the right direction, you're using the right tool, and you are not using misinformation to misguide people.
Thanks for that, Aman. Lovina, what do you think?
Quite agree with Aman there. Also, I'd like to add that ethics basically stands for responsibility. It's a mindset, it's a behavior which needs to be driven by a sense of responsibility towards all the people that we as PR professionals interact with, whether it is ourselves, our agencies, the brands we represent, the stakeholders of the larger PR ecosystem, and how we deal with all of these players That is what defines whether we are an ethical PR professionals or not. Ethics also is important because we represent brands. We take the brand stories out there on behalf of companies. So we need to be, agencies and our work needs to be characterized by trust, by a sense of purpose, which is driven by a sense of righteousness, not righteousness, on or to the literal word, but doing the right thing in the right manner, no underhandedness. It's basically a mindset, which I think it's very important for us all to inculcate. Ethics in business basically transcends all sectors, all verticals, but in PR more so because it is what we project to the world, and that cannot be based, on a bunch of let's say hearsay or cooked up stuff. It has to be real. It has to be profound. It has to be proofed and then presented in its truest form.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for that, Lovina. Pranav, what do you think?
Yeah, I defer to some of the principles which have been laid down in the by Global Alliance, and I think in one of those documents they summed it up very nicely. To say that really ethics matters in PR because it's really about responsible advocacy, respectful engagement. At the same time, everybody else on this panel also said that it's about transparency and sending out the right, truthful information. But I think ethics from a PR perspective also goes, beyond that. I think it goes into trust and character. I think that's what, the role that we as public relations practitioners have to play in helping our clients also, communicate the values of the organization, the mission, the vision, and give them feedback. Like, are those messages, working or not working? How your stakeholders really sort of seeing them. So I think ethics is a very multi-dimensional, word in today's, very polarized, fragmented, times. And I think that onus largely comes on, communications and PR.
Thanks for that. Neha, what do you think?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on the panel. We're indeed touching upon a very important topic today. I think as communication consultants, we are considered key advocates for the clients we represent, and the brands trust us completely. And I think it becomes our responsibility to work with them with full integrity and honesty. I think my personal relationship with ethics can be described more as evolving. While some believe that the concept is black and white, I've realized over the course of my career that there are patches of gray which you really need to navigate through. And especially now, since communication itself has evolved so much and it's not restricted to just print and online, it's influencers, digital, podcasts, and so much more. So I think I'm learning new things every day, rediscovering my own belief systems and questioning right from wrong. I think through this discussion, I'm also looking forward to learning more on the subject.
Thanks for that, Neha. Radhika, over to you. Why do you think ethics is more important today than ever?
Hi, again, thank you so much for having me on the panel. And I agree with everyone who's spoken. So I have just want to add on to what everyone has said. That sense that, of course, ethics is important. And I say time and again in any profession, and like everyone on the panel just said, and specifically in PR, because you're influencing opinion. I also agree with Neha that there are patches of gray. So it's important for you to define what your ethical grounds are in that sense, because they might not be standardized across the industry, and you could have kind of varying opinions. So I think what we do at Thinking and what every other agency or brands would be doing for themselves, or what we kind of advise them to do for themselves, is that you lay out your own ethics and your own kind of moral grounds which you want to tread while you are putting out any communication on their behalf. So yes, of course, I don't think there is no one will contest that ethics are important, but how do we navigate through kind of tough situations? That's where the role of communication becomes extremely important.
Thanks for that, everyone, and especially Radhika's point on why our ethical grounds have to be specifically defined for our context. I want to segue to my first question for this panel, which is about the methods in which perhaps some of the most common ways in which ethical boundaries could be transgressed by PR professionals, and I want to talk about external transgressions. So when PR professionals interact with their external stakeholders, what are some of the common ways that in which you have observed these ethical boundaries tend to be crossed? And perhaps if you can share some insights into why it happens and its impact on the reputation of the client or the agency itself and the profession. So Aman, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what happens many times is that sometimes client themselves give you a brief to work on that may actually transgress that line. I mean, we all know that very famous Google smear campaign and Google Facebook face-off that happened, and that was pretty much the brief given by the client to the agency. Now, the agency actually took that forward and started a campaign around that. Now, what happens is that it is everybody's responsibility. It is client's responsibility to not to do that. But at the same time, it is the responsibility of PR professionals or the agencies to really see whether what the client brief is in the right direction or not, and take a stand whether they want to do it or they don't want to do it, because later on what happened, it all came in public knowledge, and the client organization had to make a statement, and they actually admitted that they shouldn't have done it the way they've done it. So I think it starts right from there. So it is very important for the agencies to understand the client brief. It is important for them also to read between the lines, and first of all see what they are going to do, whether that is ethical or not. It all starts from there. And then what are the means adopted by the agency to get that point across to the larger audience, whether these means are truthful or they are it's like a you know spin doctoring that you do. I think then the means actually become important, and if you don't take care of those things, then again you're transgressing that line. And I'm actually doing all my points around right at the topmost level, where the role of public relations itself comes. But then there are so many other directions and dimensions to this, which is then the relationship between client and agency. How do you really understand the deliverables, how you actually let them know the deliverables, and whether both the parties stick to it well, the contracts between client and an agency. Then I think it is the agency and media, these two constituents play a very good role. And then there are several ways to transgress the ethical boundaries, whether what you're providing to media is the right information, how media is dealing with you, and then between agency and their own employees. So I think there are various points of intersections where there are chances of this happening. But I think if you stop it right at the top, then I think the message goes down to every constituents, and you basically are actually creating an environment where you are able to stick to the ethics.
Right. Thanks for that, Aman. An interesting point there about it having. It probably finds more success if it's top down, right? And that incident is probably not the only one. There are several others where the client has nudged the agency to work on those grounds. So, Lovina, what do you think? Is that one of the most common ways, or and what's the challenge in an agency trying to say no in that situation? You're on mute, Lovina.
Sorry. I agree that sometimes a client brief can become challenging. But at the end of the day, we are the experts. We are the communications experts. We are the PR experts. The reason that a brand or a client has decided to go with us is that they value our input. They'll give us a listen. They'll give us a hearing. So if we are going to, if they're asking for X and we are proposing, Y or another aspect of X, let's say, then I think it's ethical for the brand also to dive into deeper into it and see why we are making the recommendation that we are making, and why it is important to think along those lines, because at the end of the day, we know what would work best for them in order to project them as um, a responsible and a respected brand. That's one. But I also want to go a step back, and I want to talk about, when we pitch to a business, for example, a PR consultancy or an agency pitches for a business. The question is, are we ethical at that point? That's our first point of connect with a potential client. Are we over promising just because we want business? Or are we able to live up to what we are promising when actually the delivery of the work begins to happen? That's
And
one.
in fact, just one very good point you've raised, Lovina, and also whether we are agreeing to everything that the client is saying because we want the business. I think you're raising very good points, Lovina.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the first thing. I think if we are honest from our very first interaction, the first thing, whether we get the business or not, we'll get respect in the eyes of the potential client. That is one. Okay, and that is our job as as the pros in this business, that we tell them that, okay, this is going to work for you and this is not going to work for you. So how about you take a look at things in a different manner? That's one. The other thing, like Aman spoke about, is that sometimes the expectations from PR agencies, the brief is one-sided. Yes, again, we need to, sort of be the moral compass for the client and say that, no, not this, let's refocus on what we are doing. That's on the client side. With regard to media, because that is the other stakeholder, very important for us, in our business, I think that's where there are some, we've seen that relationship between media and agencies sometimes tends to be maybe a bit too elastic. So the boundaries of ethics, are they respected when we interact with the media? Do we give them stuff that they will find usable, that they will find value in, the content that we share? Or are we just regurgitating the same thing over and over again just because we want to sell our client? Right? So that's one reason I think a lot of media decide on whether they find interacting with an agency worth it or not. And that's another point to debate completely. The other thing is, we know for a fact that some agencies have very deep relationships with some of the media houses. Is that something that ethics, that crosses the ethical boundaries? Are we sort of monetizing them in some manner? Are we building relationships which are outside the purview of an ethical business relationship? And is that justified? Those are questions I think that need answering.
Very interesting set of points, Lovina. And so there are a number of ways, Pranav, in which we've already spoken where ethical boundaries can be transgressed. And what do you think are some of the other ways, or what's the situation perhaps that PR professionals might most commonly find themselves in?
Well, sure. I mean, I think we've discussed, how clients could perhaps push you because of competitive pressures to, push out for negative stories. But I think there can also be other more, how shall I say, innocuous ways in which this could happen. So, for example, you have access to confidential information, but you have a lot of pressure to get stories out, and you could get a lot of heat from, a particular journalist to reveal information or data points to help get that story out, right? So what is sort of purely well-intentioned, somebody could always succumb to that pressure as a PR practitioner and inadvertently or knowingly, give out confidential or information, right? So I think those things can also happen. And Lovina spoke about how agency folks and journalists obviously have mutually beneficial partnerships or relationships because it's all based on information and value. But maybe sometimes those lines get a bit too crossed and there's a bit of a quid pro quo involved. Whether it could be, I don't know, access information or any other forms of unethical exchange. I think that is how things can definitely go wrong. I mean, I think for me, in my experience, I think the biggest factor has been in trying to, I mean, get a negative story out, on behalf of a client for somebody else. And I think as an agency, we've always pushed back. I think both at a personal level and at also a organizational level. That is something that we just don't do. I think those would be some of the other reasons from my experience, from what I've seen. Yeah.
Right. Understood. Neha, what's your point of view?
Well, I agree with what Lovina said and Aman and Pranav. So just to add to what they said, I think we also, I think where we probably end up crossing the line sometimes, what I have read and I've seen, is when, during the times of crisis, I think the client pressure is immense during that time. And I've seen agencies take the not so right route, especially in the times of crisis. So I think what the ideal strategy could be to tell the truth, tell it all, tell it fast, so that it may be harmful in short run, but in the long run, it's a better approach. Also, I think this, of course, to set the expectations right from the beginning is one part, but also apart from that, there are companies pushing the agencies to get fake reviews, buy fake followers. So that also falls under the purview of unethical practices. Why does this something like this happens? Uh, we obviously set wrong demands and wrong expectations in terms of the client, and I think the foundation is not right. And like Aman made a point in the beginning that it should come from top above. So the foundation has to be right, the training has to be right. We need to teach our practitioners to say no and distinguish between right and wrong. And also, as consultants, guide our clients that, okay, so this is something that we can do, and this is something that we recommend not doing. So yeah, pretty much that.
So, Radhika, a number of things that we've discussed here.
Yeah.
Clients seem to be quite at the center of, let's say, the nudge that is required in order to be ethical or be unethical. What else do you think are some of the factors?
So see, definitely, like everyone has already touched upon in their comments, that there are the stakeholders, one being internal, like our teams, then there is the client, and then there is the media. And how do we kind of manage ethical conversations that happen amongst the three? So thinking is an entertainment focused PR agency, right? So for us, sometimes the pressures of putting some kind of specific messages out comes to handling brands or celebrities specifically, can be very high. And of course, expectations. And like I said, one, you need to set your own ethic boundaries right at the start. Realism is important right from the first point of communication to the client. And also, I think what's important is to analyze that. See, sometimes the information will come from a client, and it's very difficult to kind of go out there and cross check that information. You will pretty much take it on face value. It's important at that point to ask the right questions, to be able to kind of deep dive and see if there is something that could possibly be amiss. What's important to also know is that, see, our job in some way is to bring a halo around the brands that we represent or the clients that we represent. So glorification of something is part of what we do, right? Like if they are doing something and we make it sound like, oh my God, it's the best thing that they're doing, that's something that, yes, we all do that. Fabrication is something that falls under the negative of this ethical thing, where glorification to me is fine and it happens and it should happen. That's what they've hired us for. Fabrication is something that one mustn't agree to and one mustn't align themselves with, because that's creating something out of zero. Like I can take a 20% to a 30% or a 40%, but I can't create a 50% out of a 0%. So I think that's something that's important to kind of draw the line when it comes to clients. We can of course discuss about client and agency and media relations, the point Lovina raised in our subsequent points. But I think from a client point of view, like I said, glorification is okay. Fabrication to me is absolutely not okay, and that's the line we need to kind of draw. It's also important that it's not, when from the right at the start, it's seen more as a collaborative partnership kind of process between the brands and the agency, and not really a client agency where it's a one-way flow, that this is what the client wants and okay, fine, the agency, ask is to just go out there and deliver. We are here for a reason. We understand what works with the media, and we need to be seen in that kind of regard where an opinion that we give back is valued in that sense, and it's more a partnership between, and that's how a great communication campaign or a narrative actually gets built, right? It's not built that, okay, I say this is the information I want to put out and the agency goes out and puts that information. It's not going to build anything. Might lead to one-off stories here and there, but is it adding into something? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
Very interesting. So I think it's fair to say that if an agency and their client are looking at each other as a partner instead of a client-agency relationship with fixed deliverables, then they're less likely to indulge in unethical practices.
Sure.
And therefore, I want to segue to our next topic, which is on how these ethical transgressions happen internally. And Radhika, you spoke of the fact, and Aman, you as well, that it has to happen top down. There's a great deal of influence that leadership that has on the kind of outlook that employees have on ethical practices. So let me just reverse the order here and start with Radhika on how do you think some of these ethical boundaries are transgressed internally, and what motivates these things internally when they happen?
See, for me, I just think that sometimes the pressures are that high, and it comes from, it doesn't stem from a bad place necessarily from a client. It's just that the ecosystem is so high, pressure at all times. It's like, you're sitting on a pressure cooker that's going to blow the whistle off any second. And especially in entertainment, I can tell you, it's like, it's 24/7, 365 days. So sometimes the pressures are so high that internally, sometimes unknowingly you are giving out wrong information, wrong updates, or you're kind of creating an update which is not 100% true. But again, like I said, you and Aman also said that, it's a culture that you create within an organization. Do you take a hard stand that, okay, I'm okay to lose that client, but I'm going to stand by what I'm saying and the feedback that I'm sharing? And it's a very agency to agency personal kind of a equation. So if a culture we build in a company which says that, okay, these are certain things that we are okay with and these are certain things that we are absolutely not okay with, and we're okay to take a stand, and then you can empower your teams also to take that stand, because the founder or the leaders of the company might not always be available to kind of communicate that to the client on a daily basis, because pressure is happening on a daily basis, right? Even at the smallest of things, when I'm saying why is a story declined, which could be like a day-to-day kind of process that's happening where the teams are interacting, to larger things that come at crisis level, etc. So, like I said, it's very defining your own personal boundaries of ethic, and how do you kind of translate that to your teams and empower your teams to be able to take stands at their level as well. So so you work under pressure, but you don't kind of succumb or get intimidated by that pressure that's coming your way. You kind of embrace it, and then you work along with it, rather than kind of getting intimidated and then unknowingly putting out information or sharing updates or sharing information which becomes unethical and not aligned to the culture of the company that they are representing.
Interesting. Neha, how much pressure do you put on your colleagues, and do you see this happening often or often enough to be substantial?
So honestly, there's definitely a lot of pressure. I think you're just coming out of the pandemic, so the pressure is even more to retain clients, and you end up doing anything in your power to make sure that the coverage starts coming in. And so like Radhika just said, so creative story pitches is one thing, but manipulating a story and claiming something that the brand is just not, that is unethical. So creatively figuring out ways, creatively, seeding the brand, that's one part of it. But claiming that, okay, so it's environmental friendly, it's sustainable, though it's not, it's using plastic, it has micro chemicals. So I think that's where you need to start drawing the line. And I think internally also, when you have a brand, and as consultants, you advise brands to be transparent, that goes a long way. I mean, I want to cite an example. There's a new brand which has come in. It's a cosmetic brand, and they recently launched in the market. And just yesterday, I came across a post which said that just because there are influencers who are reviewing our product and calling us a magic potion in a bottle, doesn't mean that it is actually going to change your skin overnight. It will take time, and just because it's working for a certain skin type, it may not work for you. So that's the kind of communication I think I would like to encourage my team members, I would like to encourage my brands to go for. Being transparent, because that would also build trust in your brand, in your agency in the longer run.
If I can just, sorry, if I can just
Go
add to
ahead.
Neha's point, I think on influencers, that's a very vital point because I think just a couple of days ago, the Advertising Standards Council of India, ASCI, is I think working with a draft set of guidelines for influencers, right? And they want to impose, fairly strict restrictions on, what you can claim, whether the content is paid or promotional or it's not, what kind of filters you apply. You cannot claim, certain things like this product is going to give you 2x or 3x results unless, it is backed by solid, science or, case studies or whatever that might be, right? So I think that is also kind of important. And also, I think we spoke a lot about pressure for headlines, pressure for, getting those stories out. But I really think that, that is very short-sighted in the sense that while agencies or clients may want to do that, or may not want to do it, I don't know, but that it will only take you so far because, I think in today's day and age, everybody's pretty conscious and consumers are pretty woke about everything, right? Everybody's empowered. So you can only go so far, by creating all sorts of, misleading headlines or, wrongful claims, because at the end of the day, it's definitely going to catch up, to you, right? Because I think in today's age of just tremendous, consumer empowerment, the fact that everybody can, communicate in whichever way, I think you can't really get away with it, right? So I think sort of that's the other perspective I just wanted to bring in.
Right. Thanks for that. Lavina, what's your opinion? Internally speaking, how have you observed your colleagues just struggling to stand their ground in terms of this?
Actually, no. I'd like to start by saying that, see, ours is the biggest asset in our industry is people. Right? We are a people-driven business. We rely on people to tell the stories, to create the stories, all of that. So whether it's a junior account executive or it's an account director or it's a GM level person, whoever, everyone is important in the scheme of things, right? I think the ethics part internally for me is whether or not we are able to give an environment which nurtures talent, which nurtures growth, and which nurtures, what PR is supposed to stand for, right? It's supposed to stand for, any industry stands for growth, but PR stands for communication. Do we give the younger, kids a chance to come up in front, or are we, are they sitting in the back office just doing the clerical and the courier kind of work, just shooting out press releases and just following up? Or are we taking the risk, putting them up in front of the client, letting them write a mail or two, even maybe allowing them to make a mistake? That's okay. I know that I learned from my mistakes, right? And that is where one grows. So that is the, that is the big concern, because a lot of people in PR for a long time, at least till they have a couple of years of experience under their belt, tend to be pretty hidden from the real, where the real action is, where the real contribution to the client is made, where the real learning happens. Are they able to sit in the briefings? Are they able to imbibe? Are we able to give that kind of an exposure to? That is one. I think that is something as and every organization sort of ethically owes its employees. That's one. In terms of putting pressure, yes, ours is a pressure industry. We work under tight deadlines. We work under sometimes unreasonable demands. People want coverage, and that's about there is to it, like Neha said. But to what extent? I mean, will I drive my team absolutely bonkers chasing coverage? No, I will not. If they have concerns, it is my job as the manager, or anybody's job in the know of things, to be able to find a level playing field between what is actually possible. We cannot expect our staff to be pulling things, pulling rabbits out of somebody's hat, so to speak. So our expectations of our people need to be realistic. The one thing that really I think is an issue in our industry is how quickly people change jobs, go especially on the agency side of things.
Yeah.
And I think that is one thing, one area we need to really see what is it that drives people away from an organization. Is it just money? Are they running from agency to agency for just money? I wouldn't think so. I mean, that couldn't be the only reason. There are obviously at times unrealistic expectations of people, which they find difficult to live up to. At the end of the day, I think they're looking more for a nurturing environment, and we as agencies need to be able to give that to them, right? Because when everybody grows, then the whole ecosystem grows.
Right. Interesting thought. Aman, what's your thought on this subject? You're also a head of an agency, and you're responsible for creating that kind of an environment as well, where making mistakes all right. To what extent does that focus on?
No, so I agree with everybody that it's a high pressure industry. There are a lot of pressures. There are lots of tight deadlines that you have. But what I tried to do is I tried to find a way to ease out that pressure. Okay, so there are few things which are like non-issues where we actually made a very different kind of policy. So for example, COVID times are here, but even before that, I mean, ever since we started, we never ever counted people's attendance. I don't know if a person X has come for 15 days to office or 30 days to office. I don't know whether person X has come at 9:30 a.m. in the morning or at 12 noon in the morning, So we don't count, and we do not ever cut anybody's salary because that person wasn't there, in office. What we actually look at is whether your KPIs are met or not, and your KPIs are pretty much mapped with the client's KPIs. Okay, so there's some bit of a pressure that is removed from there. So we tried to create that environment of trust, and so I don't think anybody ever faltered in the last 3 years, and people are fairly happy about it. That nobody's bothered what time you're coming, what time you're going, as long as your work is happening, because that's the kind of business we are in. I mean, I think Neha or Radhika pointed out that at times it is 24/7 job. So when it is 24/7 job, it is 24/7 job. So why should I worry about all those things? So I think that to some extent has made people feel slightly happier about their job and all of that. And I mean, we've been fortunate that not even one person has left on his or her own will ever since we started. So I think that is one. And second thing is that whatever is your part of job is a part of your job, and you can do as much. And I always tell my clients that when you are in PR, it's a persuasive process. You cannot force me to get this story out, because it is not in my hands. It is not even in your hands. It's not even in the hands of that journalist who is doing that story. Okay, there are so many factors which are responsible for it. So we do our best, and that's how we work actually. But I think we've been doing fairly okay.
But that's a very valuable suggestion. I think something that takes a while to fill. Moving on to a point that Neha had mentioned, that despite however we may try to define this in black and white, it's still going to be patches of gray in the way we define it. So could we talk a little bit about some ways in which these gray areas exist? And how can we deal with it? How can individuals deal with it? How can we systemize an approach to this? So Aman, can we start with you?
Sorry, can you please come back? Because I didn't expect. I thought you would take the round and you go to somebody else.
We can do that as well. Radhika, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. So Just a second.
Just to repeat the question, while it's easy to offer guidelines on ethical behavior when lines are clearly drawn,
Yeah.
challenges arise when lines are blurred and there are gray areas. So what are some of these ethical gray areas in PR and how can we deal with it? Radhika.
Yeah, like I said, the gray areas are sometimes that the information that might come to you might not be true. There might not be ways for you to vet if that information is true or not. Just for example, if I have a client whose brief to me is that we are investing 200 crores in a marketing campaign for something, uh, there's little I can do to kind of cross verify if he's actually going to do it. But his ask that time is that I want a story in Economic Times, and I know a 200 crore figure cuts for a story in Economic Times. So there's less that one can do about it. So like I said, sometimes the information that comes to you could possibly not be vetted, which could be like a gray area, because you are going out and putting out that communication on behalf of the client, and you're communicating that, so the onus kind of lies on you, but that information hasn't necessarily come from you. So that's a gray area, of course, and it's happening across. It happens in entertainment media as well. A lot of the media that we deal with is also paid right now. So it's very easy for someone to kind of absolutely create a narrative which is untrue, because in that sense, if you have the muscle of the money, then you can kind of push out communication which is far from reality. And I will keep going back to the fact that you'll have to draw your own ethics, and it'll have to come at a very organization level on where do you draw that line for yourself, and what is the stand that you take for yourself. Because somewhere there is a commoditization that's happening in the industry as well, because the competitiveness is so high that if you don't pitch this story out for me, somebody else will, maybe even at a lesser fee. So the client would not find value in you anymore, and there would be people out there who are not looking for a long term gain or a long term kind of campaign in that sense, and they're looking at and you feel bad about it, because it's short lived, and you understand that it's not really going to take your brand from A to Z. But that's the reality of the situation, where someone's not looking at a larger campaign or a larger brand vision that you're trying to create for them, and they're looking at stuff which is more tactical, that I need 5 stories out in a span of 5 months, and then I need to do whatever it takes to get that out. And if you are not willing to do it, somebody else will, and like I said, somebody else might do it at a way lesser cost as well. So are you okay to risk the boundaries that you have drawn for yourself, or to lose a client? And again, that's a question that one needs to answer for themselves. We have had instances where certain messaging has been put on us to put out, and we are not okay with it, and we have kind of dealt with client losses. I'm sure lots of people, everyone on the panel could have a similar experience. But like I said right at the start, those are the boundaries that you draw for yourself, and those are the kind of business ethics first you set for yourself as a company, and that's when it goes and you translate that to your clients, when you get into a partnership with them. But if I don't have that clearly set, there's no gray in that. There's gray in the kind of information that could come to you, the kind of information that you're pushing out, but there's no gray in the ethics that you define for yourself, right? Either it is a yes for you or it's a no for you. And that's the hard stand you need to take in your professional or in your entrepreneurial journey along the way, that these are the calls that I will take, and I'm okay to face the kind of repercussions that that come with it.
Right. Interesting. Neha, in your experience, what have been some of these gray areas?
So in my experience, I've had a client who actually, prospective client, who wanted us to spread negative news about their competitors, and that was a part of the PR mandate. And as an agency, I just simply put my foot down that I'm not going to do that, because that's not true, and that's not right. That's one. Second thing, I think that we've said in black and white and not gray. I mean, a lot of agencies do it, or people expect us to do it, is pay media personnel and pay the journalists and get the stories out. I mean, that's again something a big no for us. As that's the foundation, that we're not going to pay for stories. If it's editorial, it's editorial clearly. And if you want to pay, you advertise. It's as simple as that. Another thing which as an organization at Scroll Mantra, we don't believe in is spinning an accident, a death, or something negative in your own gain. We've seen that in the past, be it a political gain or anything. So that I feel is not right, and that's something that as an agency we'll never indulge in. So these are gray areas simply because they think everybody is doing it, and it's of course coming in the news as well. So why are you not doing it? So you take that tough business call, you let go of these clients, of course, and even in tough times. But if you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, and that's the foundation that you set for yourself and the team.
Right, interesting. And this brings us an opportunity to bring in a question by Amit Prabhu, who's asking, how do you make a choice when you have a high-paying client and that you come to discover that is low on ethics? Do you keep them, ignore, or sign out? And that's a situation that you might come across as well. They might want you to spin an unfortunate incident, which is not something that you might want to do. So, Pranav, what do you think? What are these gray areas? And if you encounter a client who's asking you to access that gray area, how do you respond?
Well, I mean, as easy as it sounds to talk about this right now, because we're not feeling the pressure of the client right now. But I mean, if the client is sort of steering you in that direction where you're going to compromise on your values and your sort of North Star somewhere, then I think there really is no choice. I think it depends from agency to agency, but I think ethics and values are, supreme. So in my mind, there is no question, because I think clients come and go, and you have to be clear on what kind of a client you want to work with. Also, having a collaborative dialogue with your colleagues. Hey guys, what do you think? How does this align with our values? Does it not? And then I think there's just no two ways about it. We definitely have to take those very difficult decisions at times. I think I would say we've been fortunate to not have clients like that. Given that we're a global firm and we operate in so many markets, I think we've been. I think it's been a nice combination of values and cultures aligning on both sides. But yeah, absolutely. If it comes to that, there's no question about it. You have to let them go.
Right. Interesting.
I may just add, it's like I said, these are situations that all of us come, and it's not easy, right?
Absolutely not.
Right now, we don't have that pressure.
You have to take the tough call.
It's not easy at all because when you have high-paying clients who are demanding certain things from you, but just to add, if our role is to kind of build like a long-term value proposition for them, and that's what we pride ourselves in, then that's first we need to do it for ourselves, right? Like if then it's a short gain for us, then we are also not in it for the long haul, for the ethics or the values that we can put out for yourself, for our. So unless we create a strong value proposition for ourselves first, how are we going to go and translate that to our clients? So so those are very tough calls, and they're very hard to take at that point in time, especially coming out of a pandemic where everyone's kind of gotten impacted, where the pressure of retention is so high. But like I said, if you're not able to be in the long haul for it for ourselves, then it's very tough for us to propose that to our clients in that way.
Yeah, and I think if that pressure from clients stems from the right reasons, which is to be creative, innovative, get more results, get more outcomes, hey, that's fine, right? Because we're doing that for a noble cause, right? But if we just sort of cross that line a little bit on the wrong side, then definitely there's just no question about it. But I think each situation like that, I think also is a challenge to each one of us, because all of us here have been doing this for a while, and you also have to ask yourself, am I right? Am I wrong? Can this be done or not? Is my worldview different, or what are some of the parameters I should apply? So in fact, since we are talking about PR ethics, I think there are many frameworks available. With the Global Alliance that I came across. I think there's the Melbourne meeting, there's the Madrid charter, and I think there are quite a few frameworks that you can apply fact, in one of those frameworks, it actually talks about very specific case studies. If client X tells you to do this, what would you do? And then you apply, certain frameworks of values and ethics, and you come to an answer. So I think it'll be worthwhile for everybody to actually, spend a little bit more time in reading those principles and understanding that, because it's very well clearly laid out. And I think those have been put together by, leaders from our industry from around the world. So that definitely is very, very helpful. At least I found in
There
reading some of
are
that.
those by Global Alliance, and I'll for the benefit of our participants, I'll put a link just now in the chat box that has access to a lot of these interesting resources. Along with Global Alliance, there is ECO, of course, that has a number of these frameworks as well. Back to our point on these gray areas, Lovina, what do you think, in your opinion, are some of these gray areas that exist, and how can we circumvent them?
Yeah, so again, gray areas exist in every interaction, in and even from the point of going to acquire a business. I mean, is it ethical for us to acquire a business from a tobacco company, for example, something we know is clearly harmful to the health of millions globally? But who would say no to a good tobacco client, right? Even the article
I
that I
would say no to it.
okay.
I don't work for tobacco clients. I don't work for liquor clients. That's
Okay,
absolutely clear.
that's great.
Someone has to,
Yeah,
right?
correct, absolutely. And I was referring to your article, Hemant. You started with that Nike example. Okay, what Nike's, I mean, what the sweatshops shops that were found to be, working on Nike products. But tell me one agency who doesn't want Nike business here. Anywhere in the world for that matter, not just in India. I want Nike business. It's happened in the past. Okay, they rectified, they corrected. Like I
Yeah.
said, everybody makes mistakes. So maybe they were running something, they ran with it for a long time. Whatever were the leadership decisions, executive decisions at the time, it's not my business. My business is, if you're coming to me, whatever is your product, but you stand by it, you see value in it, and something like tobacco, at the end of the day, it is the end user's choice. It doesn't make the company a bad company. He has a product for which there is a market, but like you said, you wouldn't go for it. That's completely
That's very debatable.
yeah, absolutely. It is on, like I said, the question is gray areas, so it is debatable, certainly. But also going back to Amit's question on, if a client pays a lot of money, how far are you willing to go? I think the question is broad, and but let's, for the sake of a hypothetical discussion, if if I've been with the client for a while and a situation arises, and it wouldn't be justified of me as the communication partner to run when things go south. I think that is required of me. It's part of my duty to my client that I stand by. How do I stand by those steps, those procedures? Of course, should be more on the on the right side of things than they shouldn't be. That's one. And but I would certainly not go with a client who I was signing on, and like Neha mentioned, said that putting down competition is part of the deal. That is maybe I think for my side, like you said, Neha, it might be taking things a bit too far. But competition is not something, again, that we can ignore. I wouldn't support a client wanting to, regularly plant false stories about competition. But yes, if I can get a one up on a competition, that's part of business, right? That's what we are here to do. We are here to make our client's brand bigger than all the other brands in his sector. So
Right.
again, very gray areas. It really depends on situation to situation. I think what is the guiding factor here is how strong your moral compass is as a person, as an individual, as a leadership, role that you have, and as the agency culture that you've created.
Got it.
I think that is what eventually will make the last decision. But yeah, difficult to give a clear-cut answer to these kind of things, really.
Right. So, Aman, over to you. And as you talk about gray areas, I'd also like to segue our last question for this evening, which is on what we can do to build more ethical workplaces. So, my request to the panel would be to just give us a few pointers on what it takes to build a more ethical ecosystem and a workplace, and what are the different responsibilities of different members of our value chain. So, starting with you.
Yeah, so I think, so first of all, I'll just, touch upon the last point very, very quickly. I think it's pragmatic not to take up client requests which are not really ethical, because I know, several agency folks are being chased by agencies like ED. So it is in your interest not to get into it. You may or may not have the might to be able to handle that at the end. So even if you're getting a lot of money, you will end up spending more than that lot of money. So I think, you'll have to make that choice. But having said that, all the clients who are making those kind of requests may not have everything wrong about them. Okay, as I think Lovina gave example of Nike. There could be something wrong with them. Don't do that bit. You look at your own contract and your own agreement with them. And but who doesn't want to work with Nike? I think that's a point that she made, and I think that's pretty much where it is. Now, coming back to how to really build an organization which is based on ethics, I started by saying that it starts right from the top. And some decisions. So so there are some several things, like for example, Pranav actually quoted some framework and all those things. I think from policy viewpoint, you can put all those things in place, but at the same time, the behavior that the leadership showcases is pretty much driving the entire organization, whether it is ethics or whether it is a certain culture that you follow. So I think these are more behavioral aspects that are important to kind of imbibe ethics in your all the dealings that you do with all the stakeholders, than just putting them down on a piece of paper. Of course, it is important to put them on a piece of paper and make people understand each component of it, but I think running that behavior is the most important thing.
Understood. Lovina, quick points on what it will take to make a more ethical ecosystem.
So I think we are fortunate that the industry has evolved now to a level where we have guiding industry bodies like PRCI and Global Alliance, etc., who draw up, the steps to creating an ethical company or an ethical ecosystem for for the communications and PR sector. I think part of the direction has been shown to us. It is now up to us to walk the talk. I think for companies who haven't started doing it, the onus really comes on to the top leadership. Like Aman said, it has to be led from the top. It becomes a top-down approach. You just have to drill it down into your entire organization. More so in the new joinees who come in, because they are fresh minds. They will imbibe the culture much faster than people who've been around for 2-3 years. They, especially if you are going to make the transition, if you're going to lay out your 10 commandments on ethics, it will take time, but it's achievable. It's very doable. I think inside inherently we are all good people, so as it should come naturally to us as well. But like Aman said, I completely agree that it is a top-down approach, and it really depends on how much the leadership wants their agency or their company to be known for its reputation, for its trust factor, for its basically all the right ingredients for a partnership for any brand. That is what we have to look at creating. That is what a client is looking for when he's looking for an agency partner.
Ingredients. Thanks for that, Lovina. Pranav, what do you think?
I would just kind of nail it down to creating an environment of, or rather fostering trust within. I think it's very important. Empowering everybody to make decisions, but also being able to escalate or have a dialogue, have a conversation where everybody feels free to sort of not be bogged down by hierarchy or anything of that sort. I don't think we live in that world today, but I think where everybody can question and everybody can debate and discuss. I think that's a really good way to go about things. So I think really it's down to creating a very strong cultural proposition for your agency, because that is then reflective of the people, and then that is reflective of the work that you do with clients, and then the moral grounds that you then finally take. I think somewhere we spoke about the fact that people are not exposed to the front lines with clients, but I mean, we firmly believe that everybody should be equally invested and should have equal opportunities to work on that client. So you have the right kind of information, you're empowered with the right information to make those choices and decisions. I think over and above that, you also have to have a very strong culture of training and quality control, because with the new folks coming into the industry, they're not really that experienced, but they obviously need some hand holding. What kind of emails can you send, what kind of information can you send to journalists, what can you not do. I think those types of things we have to spend a lot of time on. It's not only about journalists today, it's about social media influence and engagement, and where the margin of error is actually even smaller than it was before, right? So I think that is what I would kind of boil it down to. I think fostering trust, empowerment, and a collaborative environment would definitely go a long way in curbing some of those issues as a good risk mitigation strategy.
Great, thanks for that. Neha, over to you.
So actually, I think Aman and Lovina and Pranav have covered it. So of course, it's a top-down approach. It starts at the top. You lay down a strong foundation, induct them, tell them, train them, and also empower them to do the right thing. And I think last point I would like to make is that be transparent. I think that's something where, unless and until you're transparent with your team, you're transparent with your client, it's difficult to achieve together an ethical communication mandate. So I think the more transparent you are with your team, the more you empower them, I think that would lead to a seamless execution of the communication campaigns as well.
And if I could just very quickly add, sorry, Hemant, I think folks such as yourself, SCORE, PRCI, a global alliance are doing a great job in, creating some strong learning curriculum on that. So I think we definitely need that wider industry participation as well, because this has to be a multi-pronged approach. So I think that's the other thing that I would just say.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Radhika, your comments on what it takes to become more ethical in workplace.
So I really think that everyone has covered anything that I'd like to say. I just feel that it's important to and 100% it's a top-down kind of approach, because that's where the culture. But culture is not just having a Starbucks kind of office with everyone sitting together and there are amazing lightings on the wall, and that's not really where you build the culture. Every touch point that you have when it comes to either client interaction or it comes to employee engagement, how does the culture and the value system of a company get translated at every touch point? I think that is what is important. I can, have a beautiful saying on my wall in the company, etc. But if I'm not really walking the talk, if my team is seeing me say a white lie very easily, and these are very small things, but this is where the culture to me actually comes in. Like, if I'm running late for a meeting and I have my colleague with me and she hears me say like a white lie very easily, and it happens so instantly that we don't even realize that we're doing it. And it's that's when they see that it's so easy to kind of get away with saying something that's not true. So the only point I'd like to add is that 100% it's top down, and to everything I agree to everything everyone has said, but we need to kind of walk the talk. It's not, culture is about, and value system is about instilling it in every single thing you do. That's how it gets kind of drilled down from the person who's kind of driving that value system to every single employee, be it even your office boy. Every single person is a representative of your company. And how do you drill it down with each touch point? That's where the onus on the leadership, that's the onus that lies on the leadership.
In fact, Radhika, you reminded me of something very interesting. In fact, I actually purchased like a property from a big real estate company, and I didn't want to go ahead with that. Okay, so when and they said that okay, we'll give you the refund. But when I went to them, they had written behind, like right at the reception, saying that ke paisa to kuch bhi nahi hai, man ki shanti hona chahiye wo. And I said okay, you told me that, there's a refund you're going to give me. I said, no, we've decided not to give you that refund. Now that's, the behavior is so different from what is written on the wall. So I think that exactly, I mean, that's a very good point that you've raised. I think, it's the behavior, of, everybody that actually it sets the tone of, ethics and culture and everything else in the organization.
And I also, if I may add that, you must attract, or, when you are, see, and like Lovina mentioned right at the start, that we are a people company, like in industry, right? That's our biggest asset, is the teams that we are building. So one, that the people who are looking to get recruited should look to get recruited in companies where they feel that their personal value system, because I can't go and change someone's personal value system, what they have been born and brought up with, is aligned to the company that you are hiring. And when you're looking to recruit also, those are the kind of filters that you necessarily need to look into, because we are not this is not medicine that you need to really be you need to know XYZ things when you're kind of entering the system. When you're entering our industry, you can have certain basic qualities, and a lot can happen while you're on the job. Like, a lot of training can happen. It's very difficult to kind of teach PR before you enter the industry. So I think it's important for the companies also to recruit people whose value system is aligned to yours, and for people who are looking. And that's what, like Lovina mentioned, that the reason why there's a strong rate at which people are switching jobs is because they're not finding like a comfort in the culture. So I think a cultural match and a value system match is extremely important. To build a stable company, an ethical company, in that sense. So those are the kind of filters one must look into.
Thanks for that, Radhika, and thanks everyone. We are running over the time, but I still want to take one question that has come in, and then whoever wants to take it can take it. It's from Sushmita Bandyopadhyay. She asks, has consumer activism triggered ethics in PR, or has it been embedded always? And Pranav, I think you mentioned that consumers are getting smarter and more aware. So why don't you, if you have a point of view on that, has it changed the way ethics is looked at?
That's a very good question. So I think in my experience, we've seen a lot of consumers, we've seen consumer activism come in. I think on the contrary, that's forced companies to be more transparent, responsive, and value driven. Because I think if companies don't have those, that framework to stand on, then I think they would be treading on a very dangerous line of transgressing somewhere on values or ethics or whatever. So in fact, in my experience at our firm, we've seen a lot of the consumer brands we work with have really are taking the time to listen and understand what's going on. And I think that's one of the charters of global association. Yeah, sorry. Also, to like listening and understanding is also a very important, a code of conduct, right? So, in our experience, I think it's making smarter brands more alert and more responsive, and certainly more expedient in how they respond in such matters. So, I think it's definitely a lot better.
Okay. Anybody else would like to add to that on consumer activism?
I think the whole WhatsApp story that was going on related to privacy issues, etc. And I think consumer activism is actually pushing a lot of companies towards being ethical and do not have monopolistic or one-sided policies or the terms which is not ethical. So I think that actually pretty much goes hand in hand, unless or until that consumer activism itself is influenced by someone for their gains or whatever. But I think they definitely go hand in hand. I mean, consumer activism definitely pushes companies to be ethical.
Yeah, I think that they have instilled some sort of fear also. I think it's a good thing.
Right. Well, I
Yeah,
think that.
but
Yeah, go ahead, Pranav.
I was saying that fear is should not be there, because I think if you're a transparent organization, then you're set up for that because you believe and live in those values every day, right? So, and those have to be fairly consistent. I think only the more evolved brands, may not be ready for that kind of thing, but I think that's also very rare now because, you just.
So now actually the point is
Just
that.
one second, Aman. I promised Radhika that I'll let her go by 6:10 because, of course, we know why. So, Radhika.
Guys, I just have I can hear my baby cry outside. So I got to run. I really apologize, but if I can.
Not at all. Radhika, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, with Aman's point, perhaps we can take one more point from Lovina, and then we will round.
Just one very quick point that I wanted to actually make is that companies will have to fear because particularly from privacy viewpoint, the kind of data that you're taking out of each one of us and the way it is being used. If you get to know about it, you will not be the activist, but probably a superlative degree of that. And that is something which companies should definitely fear because they are the ones who are actually swinging a lot of opinion globally. I mean, we have seen actually two very good documentaries that came in, which talked about Brexit, which talked about Trump campaign and so on and so forth. So I think consumer activism is definitely a good thing, and companies would fear because they may or may not be doing the right thing. They are not doing the right things at times.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of our conversation. Thanks to all the panelists for taking time out for this discussion, and thanks to all the attendees as well who have joined us on Zoom and on YouTube as well. My apologies if we couldn't take your question. This webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, and if you'd like to revisit it or share it with anybody else who's missed it. Once again, I encourage you to check out Global Alliance and hashtag EthicsMatter on social media. And of course, several other resources that are available on Global Alliance's website around ethics and many other aspects of communications as well. Once again, thank you for joining us. Thanks to our panelists, and I hope to see you all very soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Aman.
Thank you. Thanks, Aman. Thank you so